Okay, all right. So, as you may have noticed from the sign on the door on the way in, this is a Compress workshop on theoretical opportunities or something like that. And looking around the room, about half of you are very familiar with Compress, roughly, give or take a little bit, and half of you are completely unfamiliar with it, probably, or may be vaguely aware of it. But my goal here is to basically tell you a bit about Compress and why Compress is interested in this, but overall to describe what Compress is as an organization and to describe how it got going to a certain extent, because part of the rationale for this particular meeting, as I understand it, and Don will expand more on this, is to try and figure out whether there is a community-wide effort that can be initiated within the theory community that can in some way mirror or collaborate or be synergistic or even be potentially part of Compress. So in terms of a brief description, what I'm going to talk about today is, first of all, what is Compress? I'm going to give my brief and subjective history of Compress, particularly the early history, because I regard that as pivotal for how the whole thing got going. Basically, getting any number of scientists to sing Kumbaya together and say we really want to have a community-wide organization is an extraordinarily difficult enterprise because what we do is we disagree with each other on a regular basis. They're going to talk about what it does, and that could provide some guidance for what can be done in theory and what its current challenges are. And then Don Widener will talk about future planning for the enterprise. Okay, so what does Compress stand for? It's a rather awkward acronym. Consortium for Materials Properties Research in the Earth Sciences. The aspect of this, which is really kind of a slight lie, is that it doesn't encompass all of materials properties research. As I'll describe at the end, it largely involves, or it's almost solely focused on high pressure, and in particular experimental work within the earth sciences. So it's not all encompassing in terms of materials properties. It was established in 2002, almost a decade ago. It's on a 5-year renewal cycle, which is part of the reason why we're here right now. Yes? I'm always really loud. Well, if anybody downloads this on the web, they can have their speakers blasted out with my voice. That sounds great to me. Okay, it's an NSF-funded community consortium, and it's presently in its second 5-year renewal period, which runs from 2007 to 2012. The rationale behind it is to basically support experimental, and I italicize experimental because we have virtually little or no theory component at this juncture, at DOE facilities, particularly the National Synchrotron Light Source at Brookhaven and the Advanced Light Source at LBL. And we also do a broad suite of what we call infrastructure development enterprises, which basically involve development of equipment or technology or capabilities for the high-pressure experimental community that is basically facilitates experiments by the entire community. And among examples are things like making better and improved large volume press assemblies for a broad suite of the community, things like that, making gas loaders for hydrostatic loading of materials. Now, this was established in 2002 via a community-wide effort, which I'll talk more about in a second. And it actually had a little bit of a leg up to start with because there was a certain level of encouragement from the National Science Foundation. And the reason was because a former science and technology center called the Center for High Pressure Research, which was between Princeton, the Carnegie Institute, and Stony Brook, was expiring, and that amount of money was going to be basically freed out of NSF EAR, as I understand it, if some other community enterprise did not surface to play a role. So the key thing is that why did this get going? It was not a spontaneous upwelling from the community. It was an effort by the community to say, all right, we need to, at some level, preserve that money. And that did actually provide a notable incentive to incentivize the entire process. All right, the primary goals of Compress are basically to get earth sciences researchers to conduct the next generation of high-pressure experiments on world-class equipment and facilities. And what I want to specify particularly about that is that one of the things that Compress has enabled is if I go back and I look in around 2000, the user base at synchrotrons was largely focused on a few groups who had largely developed techniques at synchrotrons and had a lot of expertise working on synchrotrons. The experimental community has undergone a transition over the last decade or so to an instance where a person at an undergraduate college can go to a compress facility and actually reasonably hope to get data and have a good chance of actually conducting a state-of-the-art experiment. So it's basically sent a fingering out of high-pressure mineral physics research into almost any institution that you can think of. So we have people at small schools, small subsidiary state schools, all of whom are able to conduct their experiments now by simply showing up at a beamline. And that's a critical step forward for the community and is a very valuable selling point with the National Science Foundation as well. Our second main goal is to see new technical development projects which benefit the community. And I've alluded to a couple of those already. Basically, we don't have a huge budget to do things like this, but we've done things like put Brillouin spectrometers onto beamlines, so that you can do simultaneous elasticity measurements and X-ray diffraction measurements. I don't think I need to belabor this third point, is that basically what one of our goals is to basically try and initiate new initiatives and to make sure that the techniques that Compress can provide are communicated very broadly. So we do fund a lot of workshops and initiatives, and this workshop is one example of this. And finally, we have an advocacy role for science and educational programs at funding agencies. Okay, I'm not going to belabor this little laundry list here, but this is the first 7 years or so of Compress. And it basically initiated rather quickly because the incentive of trying to get money quickly was and making sure that there was something queued up very fast to take advantage of freeing up Science and Technology Center money, provided a considerable amount of pressure for the community. And Don Widener was intimately involved in the preparation of the original Compress proposal. And we started with 18 institutional members from the US. Basically, 18 universities signed on and said, all right, we're interested in being part of this. Had a sequence of annual meetings. I'll tab here that we did at one of these meetings, something called the Bass Report, which was a document designed to provide a science plan, basically a glossy document to provide a science plan for the broader high-pressure community, was produced under the Compress aegis, and we recently redid that exercise as well. Then one key thing is that in 2003 we finalized our bylaws. Our bylaws are extensive. They're on the web. I won't belabor them. But they're actually a critical part of the success of the organization as well. Then 2006 we got renewed, and we certainly hope that somewhere down here that in 2011 a proposal will be prepared and renewed, and hopefully renewed again. There's 54 US member institutions of Compress. There's a couple missing here, Texas A&M, some institution in Cambridge that I can't remember the name of, and one over in here. Washington University of St. Louis are missing from this diagram. And the key aspect of this is that in terms of advertising for Compress or NSF putting up something, we can point to a broad geographic distribution. Okay, we missed this middle, Buffalo country in here. But by and large, we have a very good geographic coverage for this enterprise. And one of the aspects of this is that we don't require a membership fee for entrance, but we do require that a dean or up bless the membership to basically say that, yes, this is an institution that is committed to mineral physics or high-pressure experimental work. Oh, this did not come out. Okay. What you would see here is this would be an organizational diagram, which would have the member institutions up here, which you just saw. The president of Compress, who was Bob Lieberman until this last January and is now Jay Bass of the University of Illinois. We have an executive committee, which is currently chaired by Tom Duffy. I was in that role till a couple months ago. Chermak Dara, Nancy from the Advanced Photon Source, Nancy Ross from Virginia Tech, Jim Taberzi from ASU, and Jim Van Orman from Case Western Reserve. And then we have and they're in turn advised by an educational coordinator, which is currently not exactly occupied at the moment, staff support. And then we have two committees which are invisible right here, except for the respective chairs, one of which is the Facilities Committee, Wendy Pinero sitting right there, which is in charge of overseeing our committees, the facilities that we fund, be it NSLS, or the APS, or ALS rather. And then we have the Infrastructure Development Committee, which is currently run by Pam Burnley, which governs all our other stuff. This is governed by a very detailed set of bylaws, and one of the key things is that all these positions are elective among the 54 institutions. They basically get together every annual meeting and they vote on them, and these are the people that one winds up with. Okay. Okay, QuickTime and a TIFF uncompressed decompressor are needed to see this picture. All right, we can work through this. Okay, so in terms of of where Compress funding is distributed, we actually, in terms of our facilities, are primarily focused at the National Synchrotron Light Source, where we run 3 beam lines: a large volume press beam line and 2 diamond cell beam lines, and one of which is an infrared beam line. And then at the Advanced Light Source, where we run a high pressure beam line as well. In terms of our infrastructure development projects, we also have, they're scattered around the country. They include things like our cell development project for multi-anvil cell work at Arizona State University. We've had software development programs to construct platforms for analyzing high-pressure diffraction data that have been focused at Virginia Tech. We've had gas loading apparatuses that we've installed at the Advanced Photon Source. We've had Brillouin systems that we've set up also at Jesse-Cars at the Advanced Photon Source on the beamline itself. So we've geographically distributed funding around the country. This one came up. Okay, so what does Compress actually pay for? I could have put a large number of pictures here, but these are the 2 guys I work with most commonly. So what we basically do is at facilities we fund beamline scientists and some equipment. There are probably 6 or 8 people on the Compress payroll right now that are funded basically full-time to help users. And their duties are basically, in one order or another: assistance with users to help them ensure that their experiments are successful, development of new techniques that are particularly useful at their beamline or particularly target for their beamline, and do their own new science. These 2 guys, Bin Chen and Jinyuan Yan, are the beamline technician or beamline scientists at the Advanced Light Source. Now, the other critical thing is that actually, because Compress funds beamline scientists and equipment at beamlines, and it's a reliable funding source, at least over the 5-year timescale, it actually leverages beam time. So, for example, at the Advanced Light Source or at NSLS, some percentage of the time is basically mandated at a given beamline to go to Compress users. At ALS, it's 35%. I think at NSLS, in some beamlines, 50% or something like that. So the key aspect here is that with a relatively small investment of personnel, a rather large amount of equipment is brought to bear, basically from DOE resources to high-pressure applications. That is, what's the cost of a beamline? It's millions of dollars per year. And in effect, by simply funding people and some equipment, we managed to get somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of a beamline. And often when you look at the competitive user pool, which the Compress user base is very strong in, often the user base of these beamlines winds up being 60 or 70% of the beam time at what's really a $10 million facility. Okay, we also do, as I've mentioned, community available capabilities and infrastructure. There's a gas loader currently deployed at Jesse-Cars, user-friendly. You can mail in a diamond cell and get a hydrostatic environment. This is the Brillouin setup, also actually deployed at the Advanced Photon Source right now, which is basically a Brillouin setup right on the beamline so that you can do sound velocities synchronously with X-ray diffraction, or almost synchronously. And then there is the manufacturing. This length scale here is of order 5 millimeters of basically constructing new large volume press assemblies, which is done at Arizona State University. And that's a community-wide endeavor. Furthermore, we do workshops that are designed to nucleate the efforts, such as this one, or expand user bases of facilities. Okay, we also have a major outreach role. We have a distinguished lecture series. Oh, there's Wendy Pinero again. and Jim Van Orman are right now our 2010-11 formal speakers. We've tried to make our speakers